Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, that was awfully shrill. It's October, which means it's officially autumn. Hi,
Hannah. Good evening. I'm not happy about it being October. One of my kids drew a pumpkin on my board today, and I was like, "What? Get it off! Still summer."
You're in full-on denial.
Yes.
It's
nice weather. It'll come back at some point.
I don't even know what this is. I think it's some kind of spicy herbal infusion. So the vibes are strong this side. What kind of week are you having, Hannah? How's it going?
I feel like I've still got jet lag from open evening last week, and I haven't quite recovered from it. And then it's just, it's my timetable as well. It's very weird this year. I have like all my PPAs on a Tuesday, but then I work like all day Friday, all day Monday, and then I get and have all my meetings and PPA on the Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday I have like one PPA and one meeting. So it just like I just feel like trying to get everything done on the same day is really difficult, as opposed to kind of spreading it out. I've never really had it that dense before. I'm also like a bit annoyed that my house sale didn't go through, because otherwise, if with this new rule, I could have been popping home for my PPA, maybe a bit more productive. But rather than being like, "Oh yeah, I've got 4 frees, I'll help," and being the lovely people-pleasing person that I am.
You're too good a human. I'm cover supervising this week in one of the other international schools. And so I've been sitting in on kind of year 8, year 9 chemistry, which is about as far out of my comfort zone as it's possible to be. But it's been quite nice to kind of hang out with some secondary school kids. Actually, one of them, who should have been doing his chemistry work, but it was last thing on a Tuesday, so I'll let him off, was kind of asking me these sort of head scratcher things. And one of the head scratchers was, "Miss, if you're in a restaurant and you know restaurants have waiters," I'm like, "Yes." She's like, "Well, if you're waiting for the waiter," no, he said this, "if you're waiting for the waiter, then aren't you the waiter? Because you're waiting." I'm like, huh.
That's very profound.
Yes, I suspect he Googled it, but I don't know. But yes, it was possibly more interesting asking me things like that than doing the worksheet that they had been left. But there you go. So before we go any further and start talking about our topic of this evening, we should probably do our life admin, shouldn't we? So first and foremost, the lovely John Cat are still sponsoring us. So you can see there. She got it right. Yes. We were practicing this before we came.
For those of you that have watched for weeks and not been pointing the wrong direction, I got it right.
Yes. Sorry, this is, I know for those of you, for the rest of you, that's not very exciting, but because it's all kind of, it's flipped, it's very confusing when you're trying to do things like that.
Those of you listening back on a podcast, just go have a little peep on YouTube for entertainment purposes.
Or this will get chopped out. Either way. Anyway, the lovely John Cat are still sponsoring us, and we still have a discount code with them, which is JCTTR2425, and that gives you 20% off at johncatbookshop.com across the whole range of educational books. And I seem to come up with an excuse every time I talk about John Cat as to why you should treat yourself to books. Start of the school year, Christmas, your birthday. Autumn's here. So, cozy season, which means you need an obnoxiously large cup of something warm and something good to read. So an excuse to use that discount. And our other delightful sponsor at the moment is Reading Solutions UK, and they are the home of Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development program to create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, and using Readers Plus as evidence-based adaptive technology. It can assess your students' skills gap and place them on a personalized learning pathway built to accelerate and strengthen and improve on areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot. Okay, I think that is everything. I don't think we've missed anything.
No,
so Hannah,
we're good.
What are we talking about this evening?
So tonight we've come up with the idea that we should talk about ethics in schools and kind of how do we install it within our curriculum, but also kind of moral compass within kind of ethics and how we make morally good students. And I think it's one of those, isn't it? Is it us that when we get older that we kind of see in the news and it's like, oh my gosh, these kids are behaving awfully, like why are their parents, why are they not being taught properly in schools, why do they do all this X, Y, and Z, aren't they taught how to behave properly? And it's like, do we kind of miss out on that bit? Like, do we do it properly in schools? Is it our responsibility? And kind of what can we do to do it well, and what is missing really? But if anybody wants to like send us a little tweet and comment, we can put the comments up and have a good go at answering them, or if you've got your own thoughts, then do let us know, because it's always a good show when we can kind of interact with you lot and find out what you think as well.
Oh, most definitely. And I think before we go any further, because the word ethics, I didn't really come across until I did philosophy and ethics at A level, which I absolutely loved. But that was very much, and I'm sure this will come up later in the show, it was very much linked to RE, and sort of Christian philosophy and that kind of thing, and the ethics side of that. But I had a quick gander and found a definition for ethics, which is moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So that's definition 1. And then definition 2, the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles. So it's kind of twofold there. You've got your sort of everyday ethics that, of course, we'll talk about, but then the kind of moral principles side of it as well, which is almost a sort of another bit to this, I feel. So, I mean, I suppose to start us off, I mean, when do you think, Hannah, that we should be starting this? If we're going to, I mean, we educate on pretty much everything else, so it seems natural that this responsibility would, at least in part, fall to teachers. When do you think that we should be starting to instill maybe these morals, these values, or thinking about ethical or situations that might involve ethical dilemmas?
I think it happens at a really young age. I mean, obviously my son's 7, but I very much think that he has kind of a bit of a understands ethics in a certain way, in the fact that he understands about being kind, he understands about being nice to people, he understands about being polite. He's a very social little boy, so he talks to people in public, even though he's got a speech delay. He very much shares his toys. Like if another kid is crying, he always comforts them. Granted, I've never really known whether deep down that's because high-pitched noises are made louder in his hearing aids, because that's the gap that he's missing. So he comforts them in order to stop them from making such awful noise, or whether he genuinely kind of is just that little kind of caring little bean that he doesn't want anybody to cry. And I think it does start at a really young age, that you can kind of think about them in that respect.
For sure. I mean, certainly, I mean, my undergrad degree was actually in kind of childhood studies, early childhood, that kind of thing. And we talked a lot, I mean, this is going back a bit, about, when children develop what we call theory of mind, which is where they go from kind of being quite sort of egocentric, quite sort of self-centered, not through any fault of their own, they're just not sort of aware, to then developing that understanding of, what sharing is, and the fact that other people have feelings, and that they are just doing, that they need to kind of be mindful of those around them. And I think the set age for that is, or the kind of the sort of general theory on it, someone out there can correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of sort of 6, 7. But even children a little bit younger than that, sometimes you can see that they do know right from wrong, and they do know, understand that sharing is a lovely thing. So I think you're right. I think starting this at a young age, starting to kind of promote those ideas and those values is really important. And I watched a TED talk, and the name of the guy escapes me now, but there was something called the Peach Project, PEECH, which is sort of philosophy and ethics for children. And he was conducting that project with 3 to 5-year-olds. So it can be done.
There's quite an interesting one, isn't there, where I always remember it, that there's like a glass kind of plate, and they put the toddler or baby at one end and the mother at the other end, and they make it look like there's a drop. And the kids, when they go on their own, kind of crawl, and a lot of them, when they get to the drop bit, turn around and pretend to crawl down it, even though it's flat, it's an illusion. But if the parents are there at the other end calling them and reassuring, they'll just go straight over it. So there's obviously there's that part of us that kind of understands what danger is and things like that, but there's also that part of us that can be overcome or easily led if it's somebody that we kind of trust in that respect. And I think that's the kind of danger with teaching, is that the kids trust us in what we're telling them, but sometimes it can contradict what's being told at home or vice versa. And actually we have to be careful in what we install, because we're being trusted that we're telling them the truth. Obviously when they get older and get to secondary school, they test that and test when is that kind of inconsistency as to how you behave at home versus school. But it's very much, I think it's quite interesting how easily led we are as people.
For sure. And I think there is also the thought that, are we kind of drawn towards being kind of morally good from the outset? Is this something that we need to teach? Are we kind of, or is it not just inherently in most of us? And I'd argue that I think, most people, and certainly most young children, are inherently good. They are sort of, they're not kind of setting out to upset anybody, and they do understand what is okay and what's not okay. But the difficulty with this is, as you say, is, can we teach this in the first place? Can we is there a way to ensure that we're sort of on the right track and we're not kind of doing anything we're not supposed to? Because of course, as you say, in the world we live in today, and certainly, with teaching in international schools, with the various conflicts in the world, what we can and can't talk about, what we've been told we can and can't talk about, proves difficult, because there are children who do want to discuss certain things, and we as teachers are in a difficult position a lot of the time, because we're told to be kind of apolitical, areligious, all these things. So there's a lot, I'm sort of saying a lot in one go here, but how would we begin to navigate what we can and can't talk about?
It's so tricky. And I think also with, especially, and I know there's shows coming up talking about this as well, but and we've had lots of lovely shows in the past as well, talking about kind of social media and what's right and what's wrong, and kind of fake news and things like that. And I find that aspect really interesting, because I'm learning more about that than I previously had, in the fact that I listened to a podcast. I shouldn't promote another podcast, don't listen to them, called Trolling Amber Heard, and it was all about the Johnny Depp case. And it was all about how basically it turned out that basically Saudi Arabia, somebody there had been paid, basically you pay something like 200 quid, and they'd basically use all these bots to basically flood the market with kind of false information to change your narrative. Now, for me, having been a victim of domestic abuse, and obviously the course had already been through the UK, and I watched that case very closely. They said that it was upheld. Johnny had been abusive, and that the son could call him that. And so I was very much thought it would go the same way in America. And then all these bots and all this trolling of her online, I genuinely made myself go, I don't know whether I believe her anymore. And I almost felt really sick to my stomach that I, as somebody that's been through the same, of having been coerced, of having been gaslit, that and the story that the person does that to you, then makes you feel that, then I kind of started questioning what it is. And that makes me really scared as well for what kids are now being exposed to, and politics and things like that, and the ethics of the internet as well, in terms of, and us as adults, that we might be exposed to things and made to have certain opinions politically or otherwise, that we aren't aware that are secretly being controlled by these other forces. And I know that, like, people have kind of moved off Twitter and things like that they're not happy with how things are kind of being monitored and stuff. So I think we are aware of it, but there is also that subconscious level of the fact that we're not necessarily in control of what we're constantly seeing. And I even had kids today, they asked me about the P. Diddy thing. And I was just, they were like, and one of them went, oh, I think my phone must have heard me, because I talked about that with my mates the other day. And literally, he's like, all of Sunday, all of my Instagram and my TikTok was all full of reels about P. Diddy. And all I did was have one conversation. And I explained how that works, and that actually your phone has access to that, and it does listen to it, and then it does do targeted ads or targeted things. So it listens to what you think or what you're hearing or what's going on around you, what other people's phones, if they're close enough, sometimes it can link up and hear what they're saying, what they've listened to, what they've done in the past. And it's quite scary in terms of that way, in terms of ethics, how our children are being controlled, and also us as adults are being led in certain ways. And I don't know whether we can actually kind of dictate that. And it also made me question a bit, like, am I obviously there's the right thing and the wrong thing. I have a crazy moral
as well, isn't it? Because
but then am I telling them the right things? And I can understand like people like Andrew Tate and things like that, and that I think it was on Teacher Tap the other day, wasn't it, about that? Well, I screenshotted that for this, about kind of the amount that people feel like that's been spoken about in schools. What was it? So have you heard of people at your school discussing the influence of Andrew Tate? So 40% of teachers that answered it, of the almost 11,500, over 11,500 teachers did it, said 40% said yes, positively, they're interested in him and they like him.
Blimey.
That's 40%. Only 25% heard yes, negatively, disagree, don't like him. And then obviously 51% said no. And then the others are, I'm worried that Andrew Tate's views or influences are similar views are directly having a negative effect on male pupil behaviour. And 34% said strongly agree, and 44% agree, and only 6% said disagree. So it just shows that impact that he is having on this younger generation, and the fact that it's kind of out of our control of schools. So how do we address that? How do we fix that? How do we kind of have those conversations to explain to them what is right and what is wrong in that context, but also kind of not patronize them, I think is really difficult.
But this has also come up again, hasn't it, when with the riots this summer, where you will probably have children in classes who are on both sides of that, whose families have businesses that were harmed or, violently attacked. And you may well have children as well whose parents or older siblings even were part of the unrest and part of, so it's very difficult. And I know at the time Teachers Talk Radio spoke about it, and where do teachers, how and where do teachers, what is their role here? Because there's so much going on in the world now, and certainly with disinformation and misinformation, to the point where actually the BBC now has a correspondent devoted to misinformation and disinformation. That's how kind of prevalent it is. That's how kind of alive and well it is in our society today. So I think we do. I mean, if you want to talk about a moral obligation, I mean, I don't know if I want to stress it that much, but we do, I think, as teachers, while we've got these kids in school, I mean, you've got to be really careful in terms of being accused of things like indoctrination and things like, are you going too far? I do think that there is maybe a government responsibility here to have some guidance as to how we go about this and how we talk about this from a young age all the way through to the older ones. And of course, we do have things like citizenship and our PSHE and indeed our RE, but the danger with that is that, when you tie values, and I've got to again be careful here, but when you tie values directly to faith, there are some people that won't identify with that. There are plenty who will, and that is absolutely fine. But when you pin it just to to religion, then it does disregard a whole group who maybe don't follow that faith or have no faith at all.
And I think that's the thing. There can be that, like, that doesn't apply to me or things. And I think, to be honest, I'm intrigued to see where this P. Diddy case goes, because I think it's going to expose a lot of people that we put on pedestals as good people, that were kind of good members of society, are actually not. And it's that, again, that kind of ethical thing of what you see from people isn't necessarily who they are, and kind of teaching kids kind of to really make their own judgments on things, as opposed to just listening to what everybody else is saying, and making sure you're getting the facts, getting the information, and making a real logical and rational decision. But I think, how do you teach kids to make logical and rational decisions?
I think this is so difficult. I think because what I suppose annoys me about a lot of the kind of PSHE and citizenship and although there's not a kind of out and out curriculum, or I suppose the curriculums that are available, is that there are lots of kind of role play scenarios, bystander behavior type scenarios and things like that, where you can kind of act them out, and it's sort of one lesson and that's it. And we all kind of know what the right thing to do is. It's most of the time it's kind of, well, you shouldn't necessarily be a bystander. You shouldn't allow someone to say terrible things or racist things or whatever it is. But there's layers to that as well, because there's situations where, somebody might have a weapon, or it might be too dangerous to intervene and things like that. And I just sometimes think that when you look at these sort of very kind of black and white scenarios that you're given in these curriculums, it doesn't get into the nitty gritty. I think the things that we do have available are very surface level. But I also think, again, going back to teachers, it's very difficult, because a lot of the time they don't want to dig down further, because as soon as we are perceived to put a toenail out of line, there will be somebody breathing down our neck, whether it's SLT or whether it's parents, saying, hang on, you can't be discussing that. You can't be doing that. You can't be saying that. And it's like, well, which is it? Because the kids walking out into society today are having to deal with a hell of a lot more than even we had to deal with. And no one's saying, don't be online. No one's saying, don't do this, don't do that. But there has to be, and I don't know whether we're even going to be able to unpick this evening, there has to be a way to open up these discussions in a safe space. And maybe the teaching comes from, or the teaching side of it is actually encouraging that safe space and encouraging people or young people to open up and to voice things, and have almost a code of ethics within your safe space, saying what happens in this space is kind of, and what we talk about is what it is during this time, and you can express and kind of say what you want to say, and then we close the session and we move on. But it's very hard to do in schools, and it's very hard to bring up the things you want to bring up when a lot of it has impacts, across the board, across multiple areas of society. It really is, well, it's a dilemma within itself, isn't it?
I think it's quite interesting what you're saying. I think we're so curriculum based that we need to cover this and cover this and cover this, that we haven't got the space in the curriculum to offer the opportunity to do this, to have more well-rounded students. And I, in the art curriculum, there was an Ofsted review that was released in February, and they talked about the 3 different knowledges that students should have in art. It should be practical knowledge, so all the skills, the theoretical knowledge, so all the artists and colour theory, formal elements. And then the other is disciplinary knowledge. Now, disciplinary knowledge is like my favourite part of art. It's like the urinal that got signed, and they just, as part of the Dada movement, and they just said, because I put my name on it, I've said it's art, therefore it's art. And that's in the Tate. And we have a discussion about what art is. But then I love kind of adding in those other bits. I've got an artist, we've got Damien Hirst, who obviously does everything for money and attention. He's actually got the Record the Unbelievable, and they put sculptures underwater that he made. They were of Mickey Mouse and all sorts. And then he pretended to find them and said that they were thousands of years old, and that he found this wreck. And actually one of the bus in it is actually a model of him, and he's like, isn't the collector so handsome? And it's all attention grabbing and money grabbing. And then you've got Jason Decaires Taylor, who makes sculptures of humans in a similar way, but puts them underwater so they grow coral to create artificial reefs and kind of gather kind of new environments for the fish. And he's even done a series on refugees and done a boat with the number of people in it. He's like, it's just to show kind of the lengths that people go to. It's not to symbolize their death, it's just to kind of make people aware. And it's like an underwater museum, so you go and scuba dive or snorkel around it and get people's attention that way. And we talk about art for good versus art for like attention and kind of the different ways that things can do it. And I think that kind of conversation should be far more included in subjects. And I go even further on, like my year 9s, we talk about public art. And I was like, should taxpayers' money be spent on public art? And they're all like, absolutely not, absolutely not. And it's like, but what if it was a trail and therefore bring loads of people into the area to look at the kind of artwork and it generates lots of money for the local businesses that are really struggling? Oh, then it might be okay. But it's like, but how do we pick who does the art? Is it all right? Do you just pick the famous person because that's going to get more attention and more money? Or should you give it to like an opportunity for everyone to apply? And then who picks it? Is it just one person who might pick their mate? Or do you have to have a panel and then that gets more expensive? And kind of it rolls. And I think we even talked about like, what if it was a statue to highlight homelessness and there was a code on it and you could scan it and raise money for, and suddenly their opinions all change and differ. And it's quite interesting watching their opinions change as the conversation goes on. And I think there should be far more of that kind of little bits of open, safe space to have your opinion, but also to have that open, free space for kids to be able to have their opinion changed on something. Because I feel like a lot of people feel like morally you set you set your sights and you decide that that is where you sit and that's kind of your opinion and you're on that side, and they're almost like blinkered. They can't see everything else around it. And actually that we should be teaching our kids that it's perfectly okay to change their opinion on a topic.
It's so interesting because as you're talking, my brain is whirring away, because in my mind, when we started this conversation, I had a sort of, I was sort of visualizing timetables and thinking, gosh, where would an ethics lesson fit in? But actually there should be an element of this perhaps in every subject. So you've talked about it in art, and while you were speaking, I was thinking about certainly from a primary point of view. I mean, you might have to start sort of a little bit older, but there are a lot of beloved books that we have, a lot of Roald Dahl, some Enid Blyton, even J.K. Rowling now, as we know. And all three of these authors are controversial in their own way, whether it's kind of, in sort of the language they are using in their books, in case of Enid Blyton, which, on the face of it is all kind of very wholesome and lovely. And actually, when you unpick it, there are serious racist undertones in, well, not even undertones.
Same with Peter Pan, isn't it? We had to rewrite Peter Pan because of the undertones.
For sure. Roald Dahl, who I can't remember if it was anti-Semitic or racist or probably both. And yet, there are teachers who read those books. J.K. Rowling, obviously very controversial in terms of her opinion on trans women, and things like that. So, could you maybe open those discussions in your English classes? Should we be looking at these books or can we separate the two? Things like that. Can we separate the author from their work, or is it too intrinsically linked? Things like that. Maths, I struggled with a bit. I don't know where. I suppose maths in terms of, I don't know, you could talk about millionaires and billionaires and, the percentage of wealth and things like that. That could be interesting.
Yeah, how much tax should people pay at different levels? Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Maths, English, what else? I mean, history is littered with, we could be here all day with history, or all evening, littered with examples of different things in terms of colonization, all of those things. I think that will be very, very interesting to unpack, but of course we don't. And I remember actually when I did I wrote a module here when we did we were doing history, and we were meant to do kind of Tudor history, but kind of English Tudor history. Is that relevant to international kids living in Portugal? Well, no. So I did a Portuguese explorers module instead. which I loved and was great. But when I first did it, I omitted the experience of the colonized completely accidentally. I very much focused on, and okay, yes, I'm talking about year 5, year 5 children, 9, 10-year-olds, but at the same time, I was very much focused on, the conquerors themselves and kind of all the sort of treasures and things that they reaped from that. But actually, what I didn't do was talk about, well, the the people that they stumbled across in the first place and what happened to them, and kind of looking at that. So, again, you can start looking at this in primary school. I don't see any reason not to. Geography, climate change, all of that stuff as well. Should we all be driving electric cars? Is that the way forward? Things like that. I mean, so many things. So maybe that is what we need to be doing more of, kind of thinking about these ethical questions in all the subjects that we're teaching.
Because they had like that cultural capital buzz thing going around just before COVID happened about kind of how actually our disadvantaged students are underperforming because they're not having those kind of conversations and debates at home. They're not being exposed to different kind of cultures and things like theatre and opera and all that kind of thing. And that's thought of that they're not having parents that read the news and read books and have those kind of conversations. So that's why they're at a disadvantage. And that was kind of in this kind of point to try and close that gap. And there's a big focus on oracy with that. And obviously oracy was a buzzword. I feel oracy's fallen out, it's gone, but I do still very much believe in it. And I think the culture capital thing needs to come back as well. And I do think it needs to be a big O focus, because I feel like if it's not a focus, schools don't listen. And I think that there should be this whole focus on how are you having these kind of ethical conversations with your students in an open and honest way that kind of broadens their mind. Because let's face it, if we're having those conversations, those debates, they're going to write better in their English. They're going to have more understanding. They're going to want to understand their maths if they're having a debate about why mortgage rates go up and is it fair, and how, like, for example, I hate Liz Truss because she made my mortgage go up a huge amount, and having that debate and getting kids to understand why that happened and how that happened, and is that fair because a woman didn't last in Parliament longer than a lettuce is an interesting conversation if you phrase it that way and make it interesting. Like you said, it can go across all the subjects if you just think about it carefully. But then who has the time in their curriculum planning to sit and do that and sit and add and make it? I mean, I do it because obviously it's part of the art curriculum, and also I think it's what I love it. I live for those lessons. They're my favorite lessons, to have those debates and watch the kids kind of eyes pop as like I change the narrative. And just constant flip questioning. But if I changed it to this, would that make it fair? If I changed it to this, would that change the answer? Like, if this happened, then what would happen? Like, and getting them to have to properly think for themselves is really important. And I think we need to make sure. I know that I think, is it Brent and Adam are over on Thursday talking about kind of curriculum reviews. Can we put in a bid, please, if you're listening? I just think there needs to be a bit more space to breathe and a space to kind of really have those debates, as opposed to being, we need to tick off this, we need to tick off that, and it not quite getting to that point.
And of course, all of this offers real life context as well. And this, I think, is what is seriously lacking from our curriculum. Of course, reading, writing, arithmetic, all these things, all these kind of tick points that we have, certainly in primary. Yes, but it needs that real life. It needs to be relevant. And of course, what's relevant changes constantly. So yes, it does require a bit of brain power to think about these things. And year on year, like, for example, we're all talking about Andrew Tate now. In 2, 3, 5 years, he might be completely bloody irrelevant, and we might have another king misogynist that we're talking about. I mean, hopefully not. Fingers crossed on another king misogynist. Hopefully he goes bye-bye. But not that I'm wishing him any harm. I just want him out of the general conversation. But I've lost my train of thought in true ADHD fashion. ADHD tangent. I love it. But yes, I think, to keep it relevant does require a bit of sort of extra work, as it were. But I think that in evolving the curriculum as it stands, if we're going to talk about English curriculum that we're both familiar with as the example, then we need to have these things and we need to have this relevance. It does need to be up to date. It does need to be, teachers will need CPD on this, because I think there are a lot of teachers who will listen to this or who have had conversations like this where they're absolutely thinking, my gosh, I would rather gouge my eyes out with a rusty spoon than have these conversations, because it's just an absolute minefield. So I do think, as much as we're sort of saying, this is how we could navigate it, or, this is maybe how we could do it, there does need to be guidelines and support and in place, because you are entering controversial and somewhat dangerous territory, and you need to be prepared for the kinds of questions. You can never be prepared for everything. We know from teacher training and from any CPD you do that you can have all the lectures and conversations in the world and still get absolutely floored by something a child says or does. But I think being able to absorb questions, think about an answer. And also, I think it's very easy to fob children off. And I think that, we obviously try not to do it, or I certainly try not to do it. But I think that there is a place for being more realistic with them, not frightening them. I have no interest, and I'm sort of talking more from my primary side of my brain. I have no interest in frightening children, but I do think that, with the internet exposure, with the kind of everything that they are seeing, there needs to be something in place, and we need to almost have the permission to be able to kind of be the guiders and the facilitators and say, yes, this stuff exists. Because the more you hide it and the more you kind of say, oh no, don't look at this, don't do that, they're going to go and seek it out anyway, because they're not daft. They're going to go and find it. Whereas if you're kind of saying, yes, okay, there is a dark side here, here's how we can, let's discuss it, let's talk about it, let's navigate it, I think it becomes less of a beast. But you've got to kind of you might have to get parents in and say, hey, we're going to start adding kind of, these discussions, we need you to understand that this is not in any way to frighten, to scare, to overstep. This is just, trying to support the children in the world that they live in today.
And I completely agree. And I think as much as there's this like, oh, we need to have phones banned in schools, kids aren't really on phones. Maybe they might go hide in a toilet, a break or lunch and sneak a peek. But generally, my kids aren't on it. Or if they are, it's to send me photos for me to print out for them to put in their projects, like they're little angels. But also, they're going to then be exposed to it when they leave. They do need to have somebody with the correct moral compass showing them how to understand that and how to guide them. And if we just ignore the fact that social media happens and exists, and because they haven't got phones in schools, they don't need to know any of that and don't need to understand any of that. It's bad for you to look at your screen, hence why you're not allowed a phone in school. It's not going to correct it. And I think there is this whole kind of pressure on kids to see this perfect world that is social media. Everyone puts out their best life, their fake best life, living their best life, and actually that's not the correct way to use it. And to actually have somebody teach them how to use it safely and healthily, and actually to kind of have a cull and look through, and if people that you follow make you uncomfortable or aren't showing the content that makes you happy and makes you question yourself and makes you worry about how you look or something like that, then you need to unfollow those people. But actually, if you follow the people that are telling you to get enough sleep and eat the right foods and do this and do that and giving you good habits, then social media isn't a bad thing. There is a positive and a negative side to it. And we shouldn't ignore it. We shouldn't be like, oh, just don't use it. We need to teach them how to properly navigate it and understand that some things that people write are not factually correct, and that it's done for attention and clicks, and it's not actually real, and that's not actually how you should behave or how you should act. And sometimes there's consequences. We had, must be 2 summers ago, where that trend came around about kind of doing kind of protests at school. We had the white socks protest, didn't we? And then the kids protesting about toilets and things. And it's just that wasn't an appropriate way to act. Like, just because you've seen it online, you've decided to pick something that you're unhappy about at school, and that's how you act. Have we educated them properly in terms of social media? Would those kind of things happen? I don't know. If those kids up north who got involved in the riots, if they'd potentially been explained and somebody had told them that the guy who's sending all these tweets telling you to go and do that is actually sat in like Cyprus on a sunbed and not even in the country, would you go and do it? Like, but who are they being told that? Are they being spoken about? Are their parents kind of actually breaking it down, or are they doing the same thing? They're having that quick reaction, that gut reaction. I've been shown this is what I've been shown on social media because this is what the bots are feeding me, and that's what I'm going to take to be true. And for me, like, I didn't know about that really until I listened to that podcast. And I think that actually we as educators should be passing that information kind of on, that there is a way that we are being controlled as society, and different countries are kind of don't want countries to be doing well. So they will do things and cause different issues and things. And like, I see Elon Musk tweeting about Trump and it does my head in. And it's just like, people that are trying to push people in different directions because they've got power does not make those directions the right direction to go in, and actually kind of making your own mind up as opposed to being led by somebody, I think is quite interesting.
For sure. But also, and again, just listening to you talking about sort of the social media side of it, why not use celebrity examples? Why not take these people that are idolized? I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about the Depp and Heard case, or maybe you could, or even, I mean, would you talk about Trump necessarily? I don't know, maybe with slightly older ones. But let's take these subjects. For example, should Taylor Swift be flying around in a private jet to kind of pop back for the weekend and then pop back to Europe? Should she be doing that? I don't know. I can't think of any other random celebrity examples at the moment. I mean, could you talk about sort of body image and the promotion of kind of crappy things through that? I suppose, I mean, again, you'd have to be careful. But I think there are ways and means of using celebrity or influencer examples, because this is ultimately, as well, we've got to remember, this is what these kids, and certainly kids that are sort of 14, 15, 16, this is what and who they are identifying with. This is what and who they are exposed to. And, again, parents, they might be having these discussions at home, but maybe not at great length. So why not allow space to open that out to a bit of a kind of class forum and sort of, have a debate? But of course, in having debates and in having these discussions, there have to be kind of rules and parameters within your class space. And you as the person heading up those discussions has to be, aware of kind of the boundaries as well. And I know we're going to touch on this in a little bit. But I think, first of all, before we kind of delve into that side of it, should we have another look at our lovely sponsors?
Shall I? I will play us a little bit about our John Catt sponsor, so you can go and have a look at their books. And we've got some great shows coming up from them on their A to Z series over the next kind of couple of months. I've got one, I haven't told you yet, Lucy, I've booked one in. We've got Rachel McFarlane coming in to our spot soon to talk about her A to Z of diversity and inclusion. So I think that one will definitely be a good one coming up later in this month. But there's some great shows and some great books. So have a look at their site, and don't forget to jot down that promo code as well.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the programme with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
And we're back. So before our sponsors, we were sort of what were we talking about? Kind of the creating of a safe space.
Yeah, and it being relevant to the students, which I did put a little tweet out on Edgy Twitter, and I just asked, how do people teach ethics and morals successfully and deal with that kind of opposition kind of a view at home, or competing with it, or saying that's right? George put, just keep going. I use lots of documentaries to help show real life situations. I often really help to challenge what's been said at home if the kids see the real stuff. But age and stage appropriate stuff can be time consuming to check. But I like a good documentary, and I'm very much like that. Like I have one documentary on shark water, which is all about kind of shark finning, that I love, that I do in my eco club. There's one naughty word in there, and it really annoys me because I'm like, I'm just gonna have to remember exactly when to pause it and fast forward it and then replay it. But otherwise that's like a good one. But I do think good kind of shows and documentaries, but like he says, it's like quite difficult to kind of look in them. He said that there's and as well, ones like you said, a bit like using people that they can relate to. He said there's a good one with Ollie from Years and Years about LGBT plus, and I think like you said, it's finding those relevant people that kind of link to that. And like I know with like High Performance, I was talking to that with some students, and like some of those are really relevant and they know who they are, and other people that I would think were really famous and I would know, the kids don't have a clue. So it is kind of making sure kind of you're in touch with your kids. As much as I hate like things like KSI and like Logan Paul and all that lot, but actually you've got to admire their ethics and their branding, and the YouTubers that then became boxers that then they invented Prime. So yeah, as much as I hate Prime, I admire them as kind of ethical people. But exactly, if you introduce them as people who invented Prime, the kids are instantly going to be like, yeah, I want to listen to this. But then if you show them KSI talking about his struggles and how he just really wasn't happy with himself and his body, and how he decided to challenge himself, and then once he completed one, he realized mentally he could do much more, I think that's quite an interesting one. So I do feel there needs to be a bigger space for that. And I think especially when you get to Key Stage 4 and 5, when kind of everything goes on to kind of results, there's less kind of that PSHE. There's certainly not in the curriculum, and it kind of comes out of tutor time for extra English and extra maths. And actually those kids, if they're struggling in those areas because they haven't had people at home supporting them and doing it like the rest of them, the odds are they're not getting that kind of support. So is it just as important as everything else? Or is it right to kind of reduce the timetable and do more maths and English and not teach them about this stuff at that age where they're probably more exposed to it than any other year group?
I mean, I think the curriculum and the timetabling of things has been off for a long time. I mean, I have many thoughts and feelings on curriculum, which is probably an entire show in itself. So I shouldn't deviate too much, Hannah, otherwise I will take us down a rabbit hole that we will struggle to get out of. But do I think that this has a place? Absolutely. I think that we are in grave danger that if we don't offer more time and space for things like this, we are in a kind of sort of a contextless time almost. It's sort of, it almost seems like you can get away with anything, do anything. I
Ask
often...
for forgiveness, not permission.
For sure. And a lot of these kind of influencers as well, and these YouTubers, I often wonder kind of I know maybe this is a question you can raise. If this didn't exist, what would they be doing? Would you even know who they are? You know, is the way they are making money ethical? Are they being exploitative? Are they being exploited? Because often you find that actually a lot of the time they're not actually making a huge amount of money.
Because that's what obviously Mr. Beast makes all his money from being kind and giving people money and doing challenges and giving away money. But then it's interesting that he has his chocolate. And somebody was saying that there's a Prime and Mr. Beast kind of combo coming up. And it's like these people who are in real kind of areas where they can massively impact students' lives. And they've chosen to go down, like, basically draw people in. And I can't remember where I was reading it, but basically I think it was somebody else calling them out on Instagram, and it was talking about how that they've interviewed kids, and actually kids have said because of them they are more likely to go to the sweet aisle, or they're more likely to go to that sweet drink aisle than if they hadn't promoted it. I was like, do they have a moral compass of what they are kind of selling and kind of peddling? Is quite interesting as well. Like if you want to completely flip the ethics around and go all 360. I've got another one that's quite interesting. I love this guy's handle, Old Man Teacher. I think we're all there. He's like, I've looked at it similar to visiting different countries with different laws. I've taught a few traveller pupils over the years, and it's been a case of helping them to flip between home rules and school rules, and then building to societal rules. It ain't easy. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? There's almost these three rules. There's the rules at home, there's the rules that society say that we have to abide by, and then there's school rules. So there's three sets of rules. And even you could go further and say actually rules are slightly different depending on what teacher you've got. Like no two teacher is the same. So there's that slight inconsistency. As much as we try and be consistent, there can be that inconsistency. I mean, I know I've taught travellers and things, and I was married to somebody that was kind of in the traveller community. So I know about it kind of well. So I completely get that there's really different kind of viewpoints on things. But I think it's like you said, it's tactfully, isn't it? Explaining that there are different options. And again, I've been in situations where I've had students that have run away from home because of potential forced marriages and things, and dealt with that. Like we have a lot of kind of pressure on us as teachers is in how do we support these students morally in understanding what society says is right and what kind of basically we think is right, but actually it's kind of might not comply with their upbringing or, like you said, their religion. And you've got to kind of not force it on them, but you've got to let them know that there are those other options, that it is different things to different people, and there's nothing wrong with the way they do it, but actually you've just got to make sure you abide by these laws, otherwise then it gets sticky. And it's it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is where where we come up, where we've had things like prevent and all of that, and certainly when we do our safeguarding training, with things like what to look out for with things like in situations where there might be for arranged marriage or children being sent away for whatever reason, FGM, all these things. It is an absolute kind of minefield when it comes to doing all of this. And also as a teacher, taking the emotion out of it for yourself a little bit, because whether you like it or not, your bias, conscious or otherwise, it comes through. You're fighting it daily. And I even had a kid ask me today about, the election in the US. And, at one point I almost kind of gave because I forgot where I was for a second, a kind of reflex answer about Trump. And I thought, oh, damn it, shouldn't have done that. I mean, he wasn't really paying attention, so it was fine. But it's our opinions are ready in there. We've formulated these over a long time. And so we have, if we are going to go forward with this idea of ethical education, we have to be, and we've said this already, so careful. And Hannah, I know that you really want to talk about this, as teachers, kind of where do we stand in all of this? I mean, because we are held, I mean, in theory, I say, we are pillars of the community, in theory. I mean, that's quite an old-fashioned thing to say, but there is this idea that we are of a certain moral standing just by the very nature of being teachers. And therefore, if we are going to have these ethical discussions, is there, I'm articulating this badly, but is there sort of
a pressure on us to be morally correct? Yeah.
Practicing what we preach.
See, I find this interesting because I don't know how true it was, but I think it was quite a while ago that it was in the news that there was a teacher that they found out she had an OnlyFans, and then she wasn't allowed to be a teacher. She was sacked because one of the parents found her on OnlyFans. And granted, me and my technician, shout out to Nikki, we discuss selling my feet quite regularly. But like, if somebody was doing that and they're in their own time and that's what they want to do to earn a bit of extra money, does that make them a bad teacher? They could be the best teacher in the world in the classroom. Or does that mean that actually morally they shouldn't be doing that kind of thing because it's not setting a good example to the students if that's the kind of thing that they're doing with their spare time?
I've always used the example of I'm sorry, Tom Rogers, if you are listening to this, he's going to be. But we've all heard about Naked Attraction, right? The naked dating. Where you were going with it? Okay. Because I've seen. I'm sure there's been teachers on that, and I've just kind of played this through my mind.
Saying there was a teacher, yeah.
Yeah, and I've sort of played this through my mind, and I've sort of gone, can you imagine your head teacher or a colleague saying to you, oh, what you're doing this weekend? And your reply is, oh, I'm getting everything out on TV to find a date. But don't worry, I'll be back to teach year 4 on Monday.
Yeah, because that got in the news. I remember it in the news. Yeah. But then it's if you go to that route, how far do you go? Because I know I very drunkenly on my birthday was at a beach party and doing a conga to a great song to be stopped by some parents going, oh, you teach our child. Can you give us some career advice on them? I'm like, not right now. But like morally, like
birthday.
I was like, I'm had a couple of bites. It's my birthday. I love your child. They're amazing, and I will talk to them on Monday. But it's I think, do we have a moral responsibility that we are pillars of the community, that we have to, under every circumstances, always be holding ourselves to the proper accord? Or can we get drunk and be doing the funky chicken down on a dance floor somewhere? And like, you know what I mean? Seeing an ex-pupil that's kind of, you still teach their younger siblings and that video is then out. I don't know. That's never happened. I feel like that sounded like it had. It hasn't. But like, you can see these things happening, and you can also see them kind of ruining teachers' kind of confidence and career and things like that. And I definitely feel like I morally very much changed when I became a teacher. I very much kind of realized that I could be seen by anybody without realizing. And I do, like, I had a kid the other day, it was like, oh, I saw you at the weekend. I was like, what? When? I went to the football, and granted, my year 11s told me about said football. And then I went to the football match thinking that there's thousands of people at this football match. What are the odds that I'd be really close to them? It was 2 rows in front. And turns out they bought all the tickets for the row in front because kids go free. So literally it was me, a spare row, and then them. And actually they were really lovely and very nice. But yeah, and every time I've wandered around the classroom, I was like, all right, miss, do you enjoy the football? But also I couldn't really get like rowdy and shout at the football. Not that that's what I do, but I get involved and I'll enjoy life. And it's like, but how you kind of act, it suddenly makes you think like, okay, I'm aware that they're there, and I'm aware that they're watching me, and I'm aware of what I need to look like, to zip up my hoodie a bit higher, just like make sure that I'm presentable. Do we have that kind of moral thing that's just us as teachers, or is that an unfair judgment and also one of those that kind of public and press put on us?
Because we're also told, to keep our personal lives personal. We're told to kind of, keep the social media, blah, blah, diddly dee. You've heard it all 100 times. Again, we've done shows on this. We've talked about this. Are we allowed? I mean, of course we screw up. Of course we do. But are we allowed to be seen to screw up? Because, that's that's where, again, when you're talking about ethics, you have to be careful, because I'm sure there are many lived examples you could give students. Oh, here's where I messed up. Here's where I should have made different choices. But in opening that can of worms, you kind of, you don't want that taken out of context. You don't want a child going home and saying, oh, Miss told us this story about this time that she got absolutely blind drunk and, was dancing the funky chicken down the street or doing whatever. Because there are the parents that would be like, she has a life. But there are the ones who, who would be straight in there going, you did what? So,
and we've all heard it in the staff room as well. It's like, oh, did you hear what like so-and-so did at the weekend? Like, you've heard it as well. Like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Or you've heard them say, oh, that teacher said this to their class. And I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have told them that. I wouldn't have said that about myself. Like, there is like a moral line, I do think, in how much I'm very open with my kids. I think that's why I have good relationships with them. There's a sense that you've got to tell them a little, let them in and let them know that you're human. Otherwise they will never respect and never understand that you are a person. But there's very much a line, I think, with it. Or what's Paul saying?
Fozzie is saying, knowing our parents, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on if preaching about being holier than thou. I mean, there is that aspect too. The amount of drunken emails, and I'll never forget a head teacher saying to me, my first head teacher here, he's because I severely underestimated private school parents before I not all, I hasten to add, I'm not generalizing, but there are the few, aren't there always? And this head teacher said to me, oh, Lucy, always look at the timestamp on an email. If it's after kind of 8, 9, 10 plus in the evening, chances are they've had a cheeky few, and actually the diatribe you're receiving, they will probably be mortified about in the morning, or probably won't remember sending, or they wouldn't have been nearly as crappy to you had they not had a few drinks. So yes, Fozzie, I think you're probably right about that one, but it's not the point, is it? Because again, they might not necessarily be pillars of the community, whereas of course we are. But of course, who do you always run into in the pub or when you've got a bowl of gin and tonic in your hand? I've told you many a time.
Yeah. That's the thing. I do think it's one of those, like, I went with a friend to Pride. Now I'm not gay, but I was at the event and I was dancing, and then who's next to me but one of my students? And I'm just like, oh great. Like, are they now going to run around and tell everybody? Not that I'd have an issue with it, like, it is what it is, I'm just there having fun. But then instantly I'm like, okay, I just need to not be jumping up and down, and like, I'm not dancing quite how I would have danced had I just been with my friends getting drunk at Pride. Like, it is that kind of, and is that my moral compass and my kind of ethics of how I should hold myself and how I should present myself? And I think that, but then it goes all the way into schools. So obviously we had a thing come around about as staff, like, obviously the students have a dress code. They have to adhere to it. That the staff have a dress code and we should adhere to it, and we should all look presentable. Now, obviously at the time I got one, as it said in there about how we shouldn't wear trainers. Students are not allowed to wear trainers, therefore we should not be wearing trainers.
This is a hill I will die on.
So obviously I had conversations with the doctor for the trust on making sure I was healthy enough to go back to work after breaking my foot, having a DVT and a pulmonary embolism. And my line manager is aware that I had to wear trainers on occasion when it flares up and it's painful, which is quite regularly. But it was very much aimed at me, but was sent in a whole staff email as to we should not wear trainers because students are not expected to wear trainers, and we should be the moral kind of compass. And this thing, is it if a teacher wants to roll up their sleeves, but students aren't allowed to, if male members of staff don't want to wear ties or want to unbutton their shirts or wear or the whole thing, wasn't there a few years ago about male members of staff wearing shorts in the summer? Is that acceptable? Like, is that morally going too far, or should we kind of think about kind of how we are presenting ourselves? Because even when we're not aware, especially in school, students are kind of watching us.
For sure. But I mean, I'm sure I've said it before, but I will say it again. wearing trainers, particularly as a primary teacher, is a hill I will absolutely die on. I'm sorry, I think all teachers should be allowed to wear. I'm not suggesting neon kind of highlighter pink and orange, what have yous, but a black or a white sneaker trainer, I do think is absolutely fine. I'm sorry, I do. You're on your feet all day. There is no way, especially as a primary teacher, that I'm teetering around in heels or crippling myself in ballet flats. The bunions that I've seen people have on the back of that. No, sorry. Rant over, but absolutely not.
Talking of rants, I retweeted us and said about are teachers morally are we as teachers morally have to be appropriate all times at public? Brent has sent through the policy for teachers in the union member way that he does. So it says there's part 2, which is personal and professional conduct. A teacher is expected to demonstrate consistently high standards of personal and professional conduct. The following statement defines the behaviour and attitudes which set the required standards for conduct throughout a teacher's career. Teachers upholding public trust in the profession and maintain high standards of ethics and behaviour within the outside school by A, treating pupils with dignity, building relationships rooted in mutual respect, and at all times observing proper boundaries appropriate to a teacher's professional position. B, having regard to the need of safeguarding pupils' well-being in accordance with satisfactory provisions. C, showing tolerance of and respect for the rights of others. D, not undermining fundamental British values, including democracy, rule of law, individual liberty and mutual respect, and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. And finally, ensuring that personal beliefs are not expressed in ways which exploit people's vulnerability or might lead them to break the law. And there's 2 more points. Teachers must have proper professional regard for ethos, policies, practices of the school in which they teach, and maintain high standards in their own attendance and punctuality. And teachers must have an understanding of always act within the satisfactory frameworks which set out the professional duties and responsibilities. So thank you, Brent, there for keeping us in check.
So what was that, courtesy of the NEU?
Probably.
Probably. Cheers, Brent, wherever you are. Love you. No, I mean, to be honest, do I think any of those are unreasonable? No, I don't, apart from British values, which again is another rant that I will hold on to. I've done a show on it, I think, a while ago.
I think it's a weird one, isn't it? Because they're quite vague, but I guess that's how they can sack people having OnlyFans and stuff. Cause it's not respectable. But I feel like there's lots of ways to catch teachers out if they don't confide within the teaching kind of rules within a school, if that makes sense.
Also, adhering to policies, yes, I fully accept that, but there are some ludicrous schools out there which have policies which are absolutely nutty. And this is why you must always, and I'm a huge hypocrite saying this, when you are given policies to read them. Read them before you sign your life away. And ECTs, I'm talking to you especially here, read the policies because your life depends on it. Because once you've signed your life away, you're in until further notice. That was awfully dark and slightly scary. But yes, I mean, and also, I mean, I've spoken about this before where certainly in my international school experience, the line between sort of you and parents and the community is quite blurred. I'm surrounded, my neighbors are all either my current, well, not my current anymore, but my ex-students. I've seen parents in the Irish pub absolutely steaming of a weekend. I've been invited to parties at people's houses, which I've gone to. And it's just, I've also, the other thing from an ethical point of view as well, actually one that I'd forgotten about, is the gifts for teachers as well. Certainly, again, in private schools, I've been handed, and I have no problem in saying this because it's true, but I've been handed wadges of cash in cards at Christmas, which if that was in the UK, I would have to say something. Here, it's just normal. That's kind of, huge, great big bottles of wine, things like that, where you just think,
I'm on my way, sign me up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking at the wine bottle over there because I mean, I never loan. When am I going to drink a 1.5 litre bottle of wine?
I can help.
Things like that. Pardon?
I'll help. It's fine.
Okay. Come over. One of these days we are going to pop up in the same space.
We'll be in the same country. We've got Paul, so back again. So he said, so I think this is quite interesting. This week, a football fan made disgusting comments about an away fan dying at their match. He also linked it to the Hillsborough disaster. He has since lost his job, been banned for life from the club, and been suspended from his golf club, not even a teacher. Now, I think, like, obviously we've had all the issues, haven't we, with the fact that we had the riots and a lot of kind of keyboard warriors came out and wrote their comments, and a lot of them have been charged and put in prison for that. And I think, again, that's quite an using those kind of examples to show students that actually what we say and what we write, whether it be something that we delete later, and there's quite a few celebrity examples, aren't they, where historical tweets have resurfaced and they've had to own it because they've written it naively and not really understand the context, and now they're in trouble for it, that actually it can massively affect your career. And I think a lot of kids don't realize that actually their social media presence is traceable. Like, majority of jobs now ask for your social media handles, and they can track you and trace you and see what you've done and see what you've said. And actually we should be thinking about our future selves, and we have a moral responsibility to our future selves and our students for their future selves in how they conduct themselves and what is an appropriate way to speak to people in public. And my school, I've been trying to find it on my phone and I can't. I'm going to get the wrong acronym. We have an acronym, something, I'm going to say it's SMILE or something along those lines. But basically, it's all about they smile when they see you. They should say hello. They should interact with you. They should be polite. They should open the doors. And actually, it's probably one of the best life skills. It's probably my favourite thing about the school. And to begin with, I was a bit like, I'm a bit uncomfortable with the fact that kids are kind of made to say hello. But actually, it's habit. And all the kids, when they're really shy year sevens, they do struggle. But actually, when you're walking down the corridors every day, every break, every transition, the kid's like, hello, miss, good morning, miss. And like, that's all you hear going down the corridors. And every day they're like, especially when I started, when they were like, hello, miss, are you okay? How was your weekend? Are you lost? Do you know where you're going? What are you teaching today? And like, they're just genuinely interested in me. And I'm like, really? Like, you actually want to know this stuff? Like, I'll have, like, even had kids in my after school today were like, miss, what have you taught? How's your day been to me? I was like, well, I haven't taught very much, but I'm still exhausted because I've had all these meetings. And it's like, I think that communication skill to be able to talk to an adult and ask them questions and respond in a polite kind of way. I'm like, these kids are going to go and nail their college interviews because they are used to talking to people, and they do the same when we get visitors. And I've never been in a school like it, where the kids are just so polite and it's so genuine. And it is literally like, if I'm in a mood or I'm late and I'm walking, sometimes I forget, and like suddenly 2-3 kids I've gone past and they've all said hello to me, and I'm like, yeah, I need to, like, they like, it almost pulls myself up on it. I'm like, yeah, no, I need to do better and actually make sure I say hello back. Or you automatically do. I'm not like blanking these kids in the corridor. But it's also like the kids don't talk to me. But no, they like, even the kind of little naughty ones, the cheeky ones are especially kind of will ask and speak to me. I have one or two little miscreants in year 11 that have seen me out in town have now got the habit of calling me Hannah instead of Miss Wilson. They're like, if they see me out, they're like, all right, Hannah. I'm like, yeah, try that one in school and you'll be in trouble. But again, like, I don't know whether that's a moral thing. Is it okay that they call me Hannah outside of school? I've never told them that it's acceptable, but it's now become this bit of a joke that they think that they're really hard because they call me by my first name. I was like, don't you dare in school. And I've put one in detention for calling me in school. So like, it's, yeah, like, where does the moral compass lie in that kind of thing? But also, like, what great habits and kind of teaching them morally how to communicate properly is really important.
And I really think it's, a lot of this, particularly, and I'm going to bring it up again, the COVID hangover as well, I think has, made us look at the world differently. It's made us look at each other differently. It's made us just see things in a way that we didn't before. And I think now more than ever, and also particularly in a world where, we are increasingly online, and unfortunately, there may come a time where we go back online again. Goodness, I hope not. But I was on a it's going to sound so hippy dippy of me. I was on a retreat at the weekend, and yoga, lovely, great. Namaste, everybody. And we were talking about remote work and how the fact that, people just don't, increasingly there is this isolation that's happening. And so we need to hold on to even, this is kind of less about ethics at this point and more about kind of just that communication and that togetherness and that how to speak to somebody face to face. I do think that these are skills that actually we are having to teach because we are losing them. Because I had a situation the other day where I can't remember if it was year 8 or year 9 in a class that I was covering, going, "Shut up," across the room. And I said, "Well, hang on a minute. Is that how, if you want someone to stop talking or you're irritated by the noise, there is a way of asking, could you be quiet, please? Or would you mind just speaking at a lower volume rather than shut up across the room?" I mean, it's things like, I know kids will be kids, that's not necessarily a COVID thing, but it is things like that, those kind of core sort of communication skills and the way to speak to each other, the way to listen, the way to, and getting children to understand and young people to understand that, you live in a country, you are fortunate where you do have freedom of speech and you are allowed to express yourself, but that also comes with caveats and with rules in inverted commas. And you've got to bear in mind that if you say something out loud that perhaps is a bit controversial or perhaps is, maybe upsetting, that you could upset somebody and they could challenge you on that, or there could be a consequence to that. Because I think, again, as you say, there are a lot of kids out there who are just kind of, blindly kind of going along thinking they can do or say what they want, thinking they can just shout Andrew Tate across a room or kind of, quote him and sort of say, and think that's fine and not realize the consequence they have. And I don't want to play the woe is teacher card because that's not what I'm getting at here. But at the same time, I do think that there is that element needs to be instilled from the moment those kids walk through the door throughout their curriculum to the moment they leave again, because there are many of them who sometimes through no fault of their own aren't getting that anywhere else.
No. And I think that we've got to make sure that they're kind of taught how, and again, I think as well that needs to be ethically a consistency, because I've known in schools where kids have said a certain thing to a teacher or a head of year and it's been kind of not sanctioned overly hard, and then they've done the same thing to a member of SLT or the head and it's instant like suspension. It's like, why is it okay that they get a lesser sanction if it's doing that towards a teacher to a member of SLT? Like, it should be consistent. We're all human, and if you treat somebody like that, it should be the same punishment throughout. And I do think that kind of thing. But then you've got that goes into the whole kettle of fish of the ethics of bias. Like, there's an interesting Netflix program about how there were different people given to a jury that all gave the exact same kind of scenario, but like the black man got the biggest sentence, but the really good looking white guy got the lowest sentence. And it was like all about how they looked and how they presented themselves kind of really massively impacted the sentence that they were got when it was exactly the same crime. And I think that kind of thing needs to be made sure that we're consistent across kind of what we do and things like that. Right, we haven't got long left, but I'm going to throw a curveball in you. These are scenarios that I know to be true. So what about us as teachers ethically? So okay. I know of a teacher, like going way back in my career, who had an affair with a pupil's parent and then remained at that school, is now married to that parent. And I also know a head teacher that had an affair with a member of staff, and we read about these all on EduTwist, so we know that they happen. Can we appropriately talk about ethics and morals with our students if we can't get the basic morals of being faithful to our spouse correct?
Whoa. I really do think I think if you are going to be, and this might not be a popular opinion, but I think if you are in the position where you are somebody like a teacher, whether you like it or not, your life is on display. Okay. You've got to ask yourself, I think it is. And as you said, when you reassess your morals, when you became a teacher, or you kind of reassess how you did things, I think that if you are going to be doing the job that we do, you have to seriously ask yourself who you are and what you think is okay and not okay, and ask yourself those big questions. And I mean, of course, stuff happens, and there is that kind of, well, you can't help who you fall for, blah blah diddly dee. No, I'm sorry, fish in a different pond. You are meant to be an example. You are meant to be. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. But please, dear God, no, I'm sorry. I don't think you could be the one instilling basic moral fiber into young people if that is how you are behaving very publicly. I don't.
I've had where when I've been single and gone on dating apps, I've had it, and I have matched with a parent unknowingly, and I've chatted to them, but then very quickly clocked that they had a kid, and I was like, oh, what age are they? What school they were? And actually, they didn't live anywhere near where the school was. And when they said what school it was, I was like, oh, okay. And what year are they in? And I'm like, okay, that kid is in my tutor group. Okay, I'm sorry, that gives me the ick. There's school me and there's out of school me. I cannot have a parent know that. And I've had it happen. And then I learned my lesson. So every time I'm really weirdly, I'm like, right, how old's your child? What school do they go to? Just check in. I'm not being weird. I'm not going to go stalk your child. I just need to know, because that is a massive deciding factor as to whether I even want to let you know anything about my personal life. And I had it even that the parent, the first one, would then try and book separate parents' evening appointments to their ex-wife to try and then talk to me, or would send me emails at work about their child. And I'm like, this isn't an email that you send. I'm not interested. That is not something that I morally can do. I would never date a child's parent. I am their safe space at school, and I don't want to cross those lines over. And JBL's in. Good old JBL, nice to have you. We haven't had tonight. Good point, Hannah. If we try to teach standards of behaviour, we must have standards ourselves. What those standards are is for another shows, I guess. Yeah. So I just think it is we have. And like you said, my morals did change when I became a teacher. I suddenly realised that actually I am somebody that these kids look up to. And we are a summary of the people that we spend our time with. And actually school is where these kids spend most of those time. And us as a teacher collective have to be morally in the correct way. And I guess that's kind of links a bit to what Brett says about kind of the being punctual, being on time. Now, granted, I'm never really been late, touch wood, it'll be tomorrow, but it's that kind of thing of but I'm never overly early, because I've got my child's breakfast club doesn't open till 8, so I've got to get him dropped off and then get there, and I'm never going to be there super early and all prepared and everything, because that just doesn't fit my life. But I do my job really well and do it to the best of my ability. And I think as long as we're doing that and we're trying our best, it's that whole who did I have? Was it Brian Walton I had on that did the quote about kind of, why are we all aiming for 11? We just want to do 5 or 6 really well. And actually kind of that's where we should be going for. And we should be aiming for just doing what we do really well. And we're not perfect. There are going to be bits of us that kind of slip out in our personal lives and things. We can't, we've all had a really bad day and cried in a cupboard. I've had kids catch me crying at my desk, when I've been on the phone thinking I was on my own, and they've come in the door to try and grab something or ask for something. We are human. We can't keep the fake facade up 24/7.
No, the mask slips. It does.
Yeah, but morally we have to be. And we should probably give JBL a shout out. Is he on Chris's show at some point as well?
He's on Chris Wilkinson's show. I'm not quite sure when, but they're going to be comparing UK and US schools. So that'll be. I don't know if that's next week. I'd have to double check, but I know it's in the mix somewhere. JBL might be able to send us another message. He might know exactly when it is. So Yeah. I've just seen a brilliant. JBL said Thursday. So that's Thursday. Yeah.
And so if you're one of our listeners and you want to get involved and get into I'm sorry, I've completely lost my train of thought. Look at Paul's great message. Great show, Hannah and Lucy. I think Brennan and Adam have met their match. Sorry, Brennan.
Yes, they have.
It was because we took over their show. We covered their show for a week and we're like, actually, we quite enjoy this. Let's just do it every week. Because normally we'd secretly admin each other's show in the background. So yeah, we've kind of just stuck with it and we're thoroughly enjoying it. But yeah, if you want to be a guest on our show or one of the other host shows, then do message in. Or maybe actually you go, this looks like great fun. I quite fancy hosting. Or maybe me and my friend would be the next Hannah and Lucy, the next Brent and Adam. We could very much get on board and have a show and chat about teaching. And that's the thing. We talk about the bad stuff, but we talk about the good stuff as well, and how we want to change teaching and where we want it to go and what we want to like leave our legacy behind for the next generation of teachers and kids and install in them. And I think it's important that we're talking about this. So do get in touch and send us a message on Twitter or on LinkedIn if you'd like to come and be on a show or be a host yourself. We've got a few spots about at the moment, and it's winter and it's dark. What better things have you got to do? Come get involved.
You do it for your sofa.
This is the best thing to do with your evenings.
With an obnoxiously large cup of tea.
Yeah, if you do a certain number of shows, you get a proper mug as well. Like Tom knows
we're
how
off
to
brand
treat us
today.
well.
We're off brand today, both of us. None of us are
No.
like. Sorry,
Right,
Rogers
I'm
is
not
probably
showing
having
that, I'm not wearing it.
Rogers is probably having a meltdown somewhere, being like, "I let these two loose on the airwaves, and look at what they do."
I think Tom does freak out every week when we're like, "Yeah, we know what we're doing. It's fine." So
It's fine. Yeah, two ADHD women. I think we do great, and the fact that people think we can match Brent and Adam is,
I want to know who's who. Are you Brent or are you Adam?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Have I got worse verbal diarrhea? Love you, Brent.
We've all got a bit of Brent in us. We just can't stop talking. We can't help it.
Oh, I love him. I love them both, and they're a great balance, because I do feel like Adam is the kind of the one sort of going, nope, come back, Brent.
They're far more serious and have far more kind of proper facts behind them than us. But I think that's the thing. The nice thing about TTR is there's lots of different shows. There's a show for everybody. And thanks, JBL. We love having you listen in. So we're doing a great job, ladies. Thank you to those listening back on the podcast and wondering what we're talking about. But yeah, and same as we have our weekly review on a Sunday as well, where we review the top 3 news stories and do shows of the week. So if maybe you've listened in and went, actually, I want to listen to some more shows, but I don't know which ones to go for, then you can go over there and we'll give you our recommendations as well. So there's lots of ways to kind of, because there's so many shows. And I just think as well, going through the archives and on the website, they've got them in topics as well. So if you're into wellbeing, you go listen to a few of them on there, or you can find them in your different sections. So it's just like, that's the thing. Like I love this, because we've just talked about kind of everything and every kind of aspect. Every aspect of ethics. Right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. Oh, we've got to stop doing this. Before we do
French and Saunders, that's fine.
Yeah. Or Ab Fab.
Yes.
I want to be Joanna Lumley when I grow up. Anyway, who doesn't? I mean, she's fabulous. I think we could go on for ages and ages, Hannah. I think we could. That
was me.
I think we could go on, but unfortunately, we are out of time. But I think this has been really interesting, and I'm sure one we'll come back to. I'm actually back tomorrow, believe it or not, with a different co-host. I'm back with Paul Hazard, and we are speaking to the Economist Education Foundation, and we are talking about fake news and all about the program that they have developed for children to discuss different news stories, and again look at the kind of the misinformation and disinformation side of it as well. So it's quite a nice follow on from this show, and we are on from 7:30 tomorrow across all the platforms. There's so much going on at TTR, you're quite right. Just a quick reminder of our sponsors flashing up along the bottom there. You can see we've still got that lovely John Catt code, JCTTR2425. Make use of it because we won't have it forever. So get on it, get some cozy reading material, and live your best autumn self. Any excuse. Hannah, any final messages from you?
Yeah, and we've got our lovely sponsors over at Reading Solution, who is the home of Dreambox Reading Plus, the online development program that creates stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to GCSE and beyond. And they've got like a 1-month pilot scheme as well that you can kind of sign up for. So go and check them out. So search for Reading Solutions UK to find their website and sign up for that free pilot. Because that's the thing, I think with all these things, it's really good to know that they work and tried and tested, and they do. So go check them out. But yeah, Lucy's cheating on me tomorrow night with Paul. So I will be watching from Beyond. But we'll be back.
Beyond where, week. Hannah? Where are you going?
Just from the outer space that is the internet.
Oh, okay.
Thinking about my ethics of my life.
Oh, on that cheerful note. Have a lovely rest of the week, everybody. We will talk to you again next week.
I hope this has cheered you up on this horrible, cold, windy evening if you're over in my direction in the UK, because let's face it, autumn has well and truly hit. So we all need something to kind of make our evenings a little bit better. So I do hope you've enjoyed the show, and hopefully we will see you all next week. Bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.